Hello, everyone, and welcome to this latest show here. So, we've heard from Nick Holton from Star and Sell Before We Die about the current situation at Reading Football Club. Reading fans were meeting today with the EFL, so we wanted to cover that in a little bit more detail. We also want to cover all the possibilities as well. So, what I've done is I've got another special guest, and from Reading Today, it is a pleasure to welcome on sports journalist Andy Preston. Welcome to the show, Andy. How you doing, mate?
Yeah, really good, Craig. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem at all. Not a problem at all. And as I did mention yesterday in the show with Nick Holton, I was born and bred in Reading, moved down into Bournemouth in 2008, and have followed both sides effectively through the journeys. Um, Bournemouth at the time, of course, in 2008 was skint and in trouble themselves. But the situation at Reading is, and we're saying off air actually, even though the outcome could well be the same, which could be administration at this point, they're two very different situations because Bournemouth had no money. They were being funded by a chairman who was just putting money to, or a CEO, I should say, and Jeff Mostyn, trying to keep the club going. Whereas Reading have got this owner who supposedly got $1 billion in the bank, but isn't willing to spend it. But we was also talking off air. Has he really got that money?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting debate because right now we don't really know. Um, he's got all these assets, he's owned football clubs in the past, but right now he's not willing to fund a football club. And whether that's him not being able to get his money out of China or just a complete reluctance to fund a football club, we don't have the answers to that. And it's not an answer we're going to get anytime soon because no one gets any direct communication with him or rarely any direct communication with his CEO, Dion Pang, although he did
Hmm.
speak on Talksport this morning. I believe that's the first ever public interview he's done. We've been lobbying him for a long time, all us local journalists, to get an interview with him. Hopefully, we will be able to speak to him at some point over the next few weeks. But these owners have been in place for 7 years, and we've barely heard a word from them.
There was a press release that come out
Yeah.
by the football club today, and it basically went through that. It was the same sort of talk, wasn't it? The same scenario of we know times are hard, but the bit that really shocked me was trying to shift the blame back onto the fans for that
Hmm.
protest at the weekend against Port Vale because that protest had to happen. I
Yeah.
think, in my honest opinion, it had to happen. It was building up and building up and building up. Firstly, because of the ground, they were saying about the pitch and everything, but also, you know, to members of staff. Now, my big question here, and one thing that it would be good to get your input on, is that they're saying that that had a negative impact on
Mm.
several members of staff. But surely Dai Yong has been doing that for the past couple of years when he's been paying people late. I think, if I'm right in thinking, you might be able to correct me with this, that the staff didn't get their wages before Christmas
Hmm.
on their payday. The redundancies that happened around there. Surely that's what has really contributed to negative mentality to members of staff at the club.
Yeah, exactly that. I was a bit taken aback by the statement. Of course, they have to come out and put something out,
Hmm.
and they can't condone fans going on a pitch for obvious reasons. But
Yeah.
like you said, to put the blame back on the fans for damaging the pitch, I think the whole way the statement was worded was clumsy. I don't know who that's been written by. You know, in terms of communication. I think they've not gone about it in the right way. And like you mentioned as well, Craig, to say that members of staff have had their reputation damaged by it, I think that's complete rubbish, to be honest.
Yeah.
I don't think fans of Reading or of any other club would look badly upon anyone at the club other than the owner and the CEO. So to say that people have had their reputations damaged seems really odd phrasing to me. Um, we had Mark Bowen come out, I think, a couple of months ago and speak on ITV really well and openly about the situation. Since that, we've not heard from him. I think that's because probably the owner has silenced him in the last couple of months and doesn't want him going out on national TV and telling people transparently about the situation, because ultimately that comes back on Mr. Dye and looks badly on his part. So yeah, to say that members of staff have had their reputation damaged, I think is completely inaccurate.
I think the only one that's had his reputation damaged is, well, two people, Dayong Pang and Dai Yong. Those are the only two people. And when you are, because a lot of owners, not many owners get really involved and speak to the fans, and it's normally at smaller clubs than Reading
Mhm.
when they do that. Um, so that's nothing new. But when there's an issue, when there's a challenge, when there's a problem, they normally come out. But there's nothing from this man. There's nothing from this man. Nobody even knows where he is.
Yeah, I mean, it's been radio silence pretty much throughout his whole time, and I think in the early years, some people just accepted that when that's the way things had to be.
Hmm.
But when the club goes into crisis and salaries aren't being paid, people are being made redundant. The women's team have had funding cut completely. You'd expect some kind of open communication, um, just to explain what's going on. I think it's completely unfair to leave people in the dark as much as they have. And you often hear, he doesn't speak English, so yeah, okay, he can't come out and speak openly with the press and have interviews. But he's got people in place that could do that. But as far as we know, the only people that Mr. Dai has direct contact with are Dayong Pang and Kia Drabjian. And those people haven't covered themselves in glory at all with their matters with the football club. Um, and like you said before, the most damaging thing is things that Mr. Dye has done himself, like not paying wages.
We'll come on to Keir actually because it's some quite an interesting story because
Yeah.
he back in the day was the person who ran the Tevez Mascherano
Hmm.
incident for West Ham. He's been involved in a number of football clubs. He's a bit one of these super agents, a little bit like George Mendes, you could say, at Wolves.
Yeah.
He's one of these super agents, but he's really not because a lot of what he's done is just lined his own pockets. And is there a case here that because it doesn't seem like Dai Yong's been spending his own money and saying, right, he spent out about 200 million. That's
Hmm.
what's to be believed. It doesn't seem like he spent none of that money himself, really, and has left it in the hands of somebody like Dai Yong Pang,
Hmm.
um, who has then gone to Kia Jura. I can't even say his name, Kia, whatever it is. Um, and it seems like they've got this situation going which has led Reading up a garden path, and with mountains and mountains and mountains of debt, money just pouring from the football club into Kia's back pocket.
Yeah. Well, Kia Drabjian's, had his involvement in Reading ever since Mr. Dye came in, and
Mhm.
that was kind of always an open secret. It's now been confirmed over the last couple of years. Everyone knows that Kia Drabjian is very much in the ear of the owner, and is advising him, and in the opinion of pretty much everyone, advising him very, very badly. I think it's often a stereotype that foreign owners might not have the most interest in football and don't know what's going on, but I think in this case it's very real. Mr. Dye
Mm.
does not have an interest in football. He really does not know the first thing about football, and the people he's got in place are in the same position. Dion Pang has no previous, in football, and really doesn't know what he's doing. So, as far as he's concerned, Mr. Dye is taking the advice of Keir Drabjian. Um, and you can just look at his transfer spending ever since he's come in. None of it is joined up thinking. You just look at, buying George Puskas and Lucas João in the same window. They're two players that were never going to be able to form a partnership up front, and the club has, set out record transfers there, and there's no joined up thinking at all. There's no forward thinking of how that's going to work. It's just him spending his means to try and get the team in the Premier League, and I think he's been sold a dream, and yeah, like I said, has been advised very, very badly by the wrong people.
I could have asked Nick about this yesterday because, of course, as part of Sell Before We Die and Star, he's probably involved in what happens, whereas you're more in the media side of things, albeit a fan. Now, the one thing I was going to ask you though is this has happened against Port Vale, this pitch protest. Fans on the pitch, it had to happen.
Yeah.
Um, De Jong could have listened at any point. He could have listened during the march. He could have listened against about the tennis balls, anything else, but he left it so long. And I think the sympathy from the football world is because all of those things have happened beforehand, and he's not listened. Nothing's happened. Nothing's changed. In fact, it's just got worse.
Mhm.
Um, Now we've had that protest on the pitch, the game abandoned. Is there anywhere really, though, that Reading fans could actually go to? Or what would be the next step? Is it another protest on the pitch, another abandonment? Does it happen every single game? Um, what could actually finally make this man listen?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's a discussion I was having with a couple of other local journalists earlier about what does happen at the next home game. Is there another on the pitch protest? Is that the right thing to do? Does that make the same impact? Or do people start getting frustrated when games are constantly getting postponed and there's no progress?
Mhm.
Does Mr. Dye listen? Has he even, taken into consideration the significance of what has happened? I don't know. I can't answer that. We can only hope that he has. I think the EFL have made it pretty clear they don't have the direct power to force him to sell. They're,
Yeah.
like they're saying, they are doing as much as they possibly can to get him to sell, but right now they don't have the power to do that. Yeah, so I think the next steps for the protest group are possibly going to the EFL HQ to protest, or going to Mr. Dye's residence. Um, but right now we don't know where Mr. Dye is, if he's in the country or not. We know he has property in London and a casino that he owns in London. So whether that's the next step that the protest group takes, we'll have to wait and see.
The EFL have, well, let's be honest, let's take it back a step. The EFL accepted the application from De Jong to actually buy the club in 2017.
Yeah.
That was after the Premier League rejected him for Hull City. So there's been 16 points deducted. I think the EFL know that they've really dropped a ball here. But they do seem to now be on the club side, the fan side, um, and seem to be going after De Jong just himself.
Mhm. We spoke to the EFL earlier today,
Hmm.
and they kind of gave us a brief about, updates of what's happening. I think they've recognised now that fining Mr. Dye is kind of insignificant because he's not going to pay those fines. They know that, and the way they're going after him is by imposing fines. But what good does that do if he's not going to pay those? But they've also noted that punishing the club is also not the way to go. Giving them points deductions is not the way to go. It's not going to fix anything.
Yeah.
And like you noted, he tried to buy Hull the year before he bought Reading.
Mhm.
That sale didn't go through. That's been brought up to the EFL. Why wasn't that a red flag when they looked at his application? They said that they had to take his application to the EFL on its own merits, and that at the time there was no disqualification in their regulations that they saw. So they went ahead and ratified it. And yeah, I hope they see that they've made a mistake and that they're trying to resolve it and doing all they can now to help a sale go through. Um, but this has been going on for months, and fans have now had to
Mhm.
take drastic action into their own hands. It should never have got to this state. This should have been cleared up months ago, and fans never would have had to have got to this state. But sadly, it has had to go this far.
One thing that I did bring up with Nick yesterday is with regards to if the club go into administration. Now, clubs like we're saying normally go into administration because they've been ran or the owners haven't got the money. A good example is Bournemouth on that front.
Mhm,
A lot of clubs owners run out of money. Simon Jordan, for all his criticism of the protests, you know, towards the end of his time at Crystal Palace, was running out of money,
mhm.
and therefore he had to do something. He had to sell the club. He had to make a change. Um, with this situation, it's not like that. Dai Yong, is believed to have money. It's believed to be able to fund the club. Um, the two things is, administration. If the football club goes into administration, because it's run out of money, I'm guessing the same rules apply. But if the EFL ban Dai Yong from running the football club, ban him
Mhm.
as director, surely that's a forced administration if the club then into administration because of that sole reason.
Yeah, that's something again that we brought up with the EFL about
Mhm.
them trying to disqualify him, and that had to go to an independent panel, and they recommended that a fine was the way to go rather than disqualifying him. Why they came to that decision, I don't know.
Yeah,
That's something we definitely want answers to. But at the time, that was their recommendation that a fine was the appropriate action to take. In terms of administration, I think that's quite a complex issue and one that you probably have more knowledge
yeah.
than me on in terms of Bournemouth situation. Just on that, how drawn out was that process for Bournemouth in terms of having their owner take the club into administration?
Very,
Yeah.
very. It was a very, very drawn out process, but it was quite clear that that was the route that it was going.
Hmm.
Um, it was a case that the club shop, all the stock was being taken out by bailiffs from the club shop and
Yeah.
then having to be returned, being paid for again, returned. And that was a cycle that continued for month after month after month after month. Jeff Mostyn was having to put down his own money, having to sell items that he owned
Mm.
to actually keep the club going. Don't get me wrong, he's got all that money back, and
Yeah.
rightly so. But at that time, it was very much touch or go. It could have been a case. In fact, Gerald Krasner turned around and said, to Jeff Mostyn, get in your car, drive away, and don't even ever think about it again. But he kept Bournemouth going. But that was a situation where Bournemouth had no money.
Hmm.
And Dai Yong, it's believed he's got a casino, he's got a massive house, next to Buckingham Palace. He's got all these assets, and like Sir John Madejski says, he should be able to manage this football club in a way that he can look after it. Maybe not spend loads and loads of money on transfers and things like that. I don't think Reading fans are asking for that,
Mm.
but to make sure that there's no unnecessary player sales, which looks like it's going to happen. But B, make sure that this sort of situation and it's a smooth sail. But it seems like he's got the club into a lot of debt. He's not really bothered by it. He's just hiding away. Nobody knows where he is. He's lost complete and utter interest. And he's quite happy for the club to be asset stripped effectively.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point as well. You bring up about, fans aren't demanding him to come in and spend all that money. That's never, you know, of course, fans want their club to spend some kind of money, but
Yeah.
they weren't demanding him to spend, 8 million on Puskás, 7 million on Sonny Aluko at the time. Yeah, you just want an owner that's going to come in and fund the club adequately and pay wages on time. That should be the bare minimum. And another point you mentioned there with owning assets, Reading have a fantastic training ground which he invested in. Just to let that all blow away and be for nothing, it's just such a travesty. They've got Premier League level facilities there, and it just seems mad that he would be willing to invest in all of that and let it go to nothing. Um, it just seems such a mad situation.
Reading have got a stadium and, like you say, the training ground that Bournemouth could only dream of,
Yeah.
really. Only dream of. But just going back to the earlier point, with regards to administration,
Hmm.
because, like I say, most clubs go into administration because the owners are skin. Because the owners are skin. If it's a case where De Jong is just showing that he's just not a fit and proper person, considering the EFL have made a mistake by giving him the keys to run the football club in the first place, my argument with the EFL now would be if their disqualification of him, which I think is going to happen, I think it's got to happen.
Hmm.
They've got to go back to that independent commission and say he's not done it again. We have to disqualify him. In my honest opinion, that will probably put Reading Football Club into administration, which will probably be, even though it sounds like it's a horrible thing to go through, is probably the best way out of this because a new owner can come in, pay like how many pence in the pound
Yeah.
and, clear it all and start afresh, probably from League Two level if the points deductions do arise. But my argument with that is because it's a completely different scenario, should the points deductions apply?
That's a really good point. I don't know. Is that the case? If a club goes to the administration, I think it's 15 points that come off.
It's 10 normally.
10, is it? Yeah.
It's 10 normally, unless rules have changed, which, you know, it's very, very possible. Um, of course, there was the 17 points that come off Bournemouth, but of course, there was irregularities and things like that as well
Hmm.
that was built into that. Um, but personally, I don't think it's a similar. It's not the same sort of situation. This man has got money, but he's just neglected the whole club. He's walked away from the club, and the fans and whoever is the next owner needs to be protected.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to make. If the club goes into administration and the 10 points come off, that's effectively, consigning Reading to League Two, pretty much, because it's going to be tough enough already for them to stay in League One. If 10 points come off, it's going to look very unlikely that they'll survive. Yeah, and I think a lot of the fans have probably come to the realization that administration could be the best way for the club to eventually go forward. And that's the situation that no fan should ever have to be in, that they're wishing that their club will go into administration just to get rid of this man. That's the sad reality of it now. And like you say, with going to the independent panel and recommending that disqualification is the way to go, I think that is the only way to go, because they've recognised that fines are the only way to impose some kind of disqualification against him. Punishment against him, but that's not having any kind of effect, because, like we mentioned before, he's not paying the fines. So surely
Mm.
disqualification is the only way to go.
It doesn't seem that he's that bothered about, the money that he's put into the football club. He
Yeah.
doesn't seem very bothered about the value of the football club, even though one of my, suggestions and one of my thought processes was that Reading effectively, the EFL need to make Reading Football Club worthless to De Jong. Not
Mm-hmm.
to everybody, but worthless to him as a person. And one of the suggestions I made as well was select car leasing. And I don't know, you might have more information on this, because of course they've paid players' wages on a number of occasions, which, they probably won't get back.
Mm.
Touch wood, they will do. Um, they've paid it because they're Reading fans, but if they were to put a charge against, say, for example, the stadium or the club or the Bearwood, would that help, reduce the value of Reading Football Club to a point where De Jong is like, it's not worth anything to me. I might as well just sell the football club or put into administration to get back what I can.
Yeah, and I think right now we're seeing a situation where it appears as if he's holding on for as long as possible so that he
Hmm.
can asset strip the club and try and get as
Yeah.
much value as possible. And you mentioned it before with the potential player sales. That seems inevitable, that first team players are going to be sold off. It looks like they're going to be sold off at a cut price, but ultimately that's probably money that's going in his pocket rather than the finances of the football club. So it appears, this is the last resort for him to make as much money as he can from stripping assets from the club before, it's either sold or goes into administration.
Reading really, and this is going back to my childhood under Sir John Madejski, was one of the best rang football clubs in the country.
Yeah.
It was a football club that everybody else looked up to, really, in the
Mhm.
EFL. Shiny new stadium, you know, Hogwood was a good training ground in itself. Don't get me wrong, it's not where Bearwood is. Bearwood is one of the best out there, which is why it's even more ridiculous that Reading Football Club could be playing in League Two next season. But with that sort of legacy, Sir John Madejski and Eamon Dolan building up the academy, what he did with that, to see that all go to waste, it's like the polar opposite. And it's sad, really, that, let's be honest, category one, the academy status, is probably going to be lost because of De Jong.
Exactly, and it's already been lost once before, and the people working in the academy had to fight tooth and nail and put in so much work to get that status back, and that's going to be revoked if things keep going as they are. And the academy is such a big thing for this club, like you mentioned, with Eamon Dolan, all the work he did, the legacy he built, all the players that have come through and under his watch. Yeah, it's just such a shame, because Reading built that legacy and had that reputation, like you say, of being one of the best run clubs in the EFL. Um, they always lived within their means under John Madejski. Some people might have moaned at the time that they probably didn't spend enough money. If you look back in hindsight now, the way he ran the club was fantastic and managed to get them into the Premier League twice. With a minimal budget, really.
Yeah.
And even when they got promoted into the Premier League, never spent big. Um, and had some amazing. The first season in the Premier League was absolutely incredible, and they managed to do that without spending big. In the second time around under Brian McDermott too, they were very much living within their means, and to look where it's gone now is just it's a tragedy.
I think the clubs, yeah, and the best way to, you've seen it with Luton really, where they've done it shrewdly to actually get themselves into the position that they have in the Premier League. I think it's going to be difficult for them to stay there, but it was difficult for Reading to stay there, but
Mm-hmm.
it was all credit to Steve Coppell and the side that he built
Mm.
why they did that season. And it was over a period of time. But where De Jong has seemed to want instant success but bought terribly,
Yeah,
terribly. Remember, he was a game away from being a Premier League chairman, this man.
yeah, exactly. I think at the time he was trying to fast track the team into the Premier League, and
Hmm.
like you say, being one kick away from it. He probably expected him to get promoted that season, and then when they didn't, he threw loads of money at it, and I think sold everyone a dream that he would be able to get them into the Premier League. And I remember speaking to Jose Gomez when he was manager at the time, and I think he was sold that dream of going into the Premier League too, and very much riding the coattails of the ownership at the time, who were spending what we now know is way above their means, and it's the reason why they were punished so significantly for breaching the profitability and sustainability rules. That's come back to bite them massively. And they were hoping they could get that short-term success, and they weren't able to do it. And the consequences are being felt now, and it's ultimately not Mr. Dye that's being punished for it. 'Cause like you say, he seems happy to be able to, well, maybe not happy, but just doesn't care that he's thrown away hundreds of millions of pounds. It's the fans and the staff that are feeling the effects now.
I think before we come on to the final point, what I do want to mention is a little bit of a positive, and this is the players and the management staff. I think Ruben Sellers has been criticised by some fans, but has been absolutely outstanding in his whole approach to this situation and how he's handled this, because during, I think it was January, wasn't it, he didn't take his wages at all.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't take his wages at all. So his approach has been first class. And the players, I've seen a number of games this season, the Eastleigh Cup game, of course, a defeat against lower league opposition. But, like I was saying to my dad after that game, I said, you would have thought that Reading would have been the non league side because it was all youngsters,
Mm-hmm.
whereas Eastleigh had players that had been playing in the EFL beforehand in their squad. Um, and for them to do what they've done, and of course the Wigan's game as well, I watched at home, and I think for them to get themselves into a position where they are, let's be honest, Reading would be out the relegation zone without this points deduction, without De Jong again, without his what he's inflicted. To get the position in that position where they can get out of this trouble, if there's no more points deductions, it's outstanding, really, from a young group of players.
Yeah, firstly on the point there of Ruben Sellers, I think he's been a class act pretty much throughout his time here. And yeah, fair enough, people can have criticisms about his tactical direction and maybe being a bit too stubborn not to change it up quickly enough. But some changes have been made now, and I think we've seen that in recent months. The results have started to turn around, and like you mentioned as well, it's a really young team. A lot of them playing first team football for the first time and getting that experience and doing it under the turmoil of what's happening at the club too. So it's been a really tough situation for them. Um, yeah, Ruben Sellers is, I think he's had to take a step back and try to separate himself from the issues that are happening at the club and realizing he can't have the impact that he wants, um, in terms of the sale of the club, he can't have any direct impact on that as much as he would like to. But yeah, not taking his wages in December was very much the right thing to do from him and Mark Bowen, and I think right now they're doing all they can.
I know that the answer to this question is going to be as soon as possible, from Reading fans, and that is really, when does this need to end? As soon as possible would be the right answer. But from a logical way of thinking about this, the situation as it is De Jong is nowhere to be seen. Nobody can get hold of him apart from De Jong Pang. Um, how long? When does this need to end? Logically, so before it is a huge, it's already a huge problem, but before it's very, very dangerous and threatens even the existence of the football club.
Yeah, I still think this process could take months. Even if a sale is agreed, that doesn't look like it's happening anytime soon, although we're told by the EFL that there
Hmm.
are still interested parties out there. But whether sales talks have progressed to any significant rate that we'll see a sale in the next few months, I'm not sure. I'm quite skeptical over that. Even once a sale has been agreed, that it's still going to take a good 6 to 8 weeks, I believe, for a whole full takeover to for the processes to go through. So this is still going to be a long term thing, and it doesn't look like there's any end. I don't want to be negative about it, but I think we have to be realistic. There's no immediate conclusion in
Hmm.
sight. As sad as that is, yeah, for fans to be worried about the existence of their club is something that should never happen. Football clubs have to be protected. Reading is one of the oldest clubs in the whole of the EFL, and for it to even be a question whether they could be in existence this time next year is, that's just shameful that that question is even there.
It's an absolute disgrace what this man has done, and why the EFL have given them the keys. There needs to be more power from the EFL to remove these people, forcefully from these football clubs.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in my honest opinion, and why I did ask that question, I hope it come across well, or made sense, because it's a difficult one to explain. Because the answer is as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody wants him gone as soon as possible, but when does it become dangerous? In my view, if this isn't sorted by the start of next season, we are talking about a situation where Bury were in, where they're asking the question: can the club conclude the season? Can the club conclude the League Two season? No, no way do Reading Football Club want any points deductions in League Two, and even threaten dropping out the Football League in
Yeah,
any sense. I don't think that'll happen. Don't think that'll happen. And I think in the long run, somebody will buy the club. It's not going to go the way of Beijing Ren or KSV Rosesley, touch wood. But I think by the start of next season, would you agree with me? It has to be done, because otherwise the EFL are going to ask, can you complete the season?
yeah, I think you're completely right. It has to be done before the start of next season, or you know, the the football club can't continue this way. They can't be funded throughout another season, or not funded throughout another season. Um, so yeah, this has to be resolved as quickly as possible. Of course, the ownership has to go into the right hands. It can't just be sold to anyone. Dayong Pang made that point this morning, calling for patience, and ironically saying that the football club needs to go into the right hands. Of course, being ironic because right now the club's not in the right hands. But
Hmm.
yeah, it has to go to the right owner. Whether that person's out there or not remains to be seen. We can only cross our fingers and hope that the right person is out there, the right owner's out there to fund the club adequately, just do the bare minimum of paying staff on time and making sure there is a future for this football club. That is the bottom line, really. That there has to be a future for Reading Football Club.
I think he's got a cheek telling Reading fans to be patient, because I think Reading
Yeah.
fans are some of the most patient fans in football. And I think, any other club's football fans would have already kicked off big time because of this situation. We would be where Reading were on Saturday, probably November, October time, with a lot of other clubs. So he's had patience from Reading fans,
Mhm.
and I think Dai Yong Pang now needs to go to Dai Yong and turn around and say, "This game's up. You've got to get out of here quickly."
Yeah, the Reading fans have been incredibly patient, while the protest group have been doing fantastic work over the months, and finally this story is getting the recognition it deserves on a national level and international level. Um, yeah, like you said, the fans have been incredibly patient, and they've had to take drastic action now, and that's been ramped up, dramatically, and they've been left with no choice. It's what they've had to do to get people to sit up and take notice. And you know, Dayong Pang, like you say, having the cheek to come out and call for more patience is just a disgrace, really. Um, the comments are so out of touch, and it just it seems like he's so out of touch with the whole thing. Probably had his head buried in the sand if he thinks that he has the right, or Dayong has the right to any more time, because they've had more than enough time to have talks with people over the sale of the club. It should have already been wrapped up months ago.
Completely agree, Andy. Well, hopefully, fingers crossed, things will start moving thanks to the pressure that's been put on by the Reading fans. I don't want to see this situation any longer. It's, as a club that I used to go to the old Elm Park and, the Badesi Stadium during those early years, it's upset me a lot. It's upset me a lot over a period of time. And although, yes, this is a Bournemouth show, I think the whole of football has to come together, because a lot of Bournemouth fans will say that Reading are rivals, but without football clubs there can be no rivalry. Would you agree?
Exactly that. I think one of the most heartwarming things to see throughout this whole situation is, for the most part, opposition fans have been fantastic with their support and sympathy. Um, you don't have to look any further than the way that Port Vale fans responded on Saturday. They were fantastic. There's been an outpouring on social media from so many different fans that I've seen, giving their sympathies and support to Reading. So that's so great to see, and all football fans need that, because this could happen to any club. This really could. It could, if circumstances had gone differently, it could have happened to Hull City had Dayong taken over. We've seen it happen to
Yeah.
Bury. We've seen it happen to Macclesfield. Southend have had their problems. This really could happen to anyone. And I think most football fans are very aware of that, and the ones that aren't, hopefully, have had their eyes opened to what can happen.
Yep, definitely. And it shows as well, what a good bunch of fans Reading fans are as well. Because after, the abandonment, and of course, Port Vale is a long way away, Stoke-on-Trent is a long way
Mm.
from Reading. The support that they've given for the John Rudge statue is phenomenal. I think that's up to about 6,000 now, isn't it? Six
Yeah,
thousand
I think
pounds.
it went over 6,000 today, which is just amazing. It's so classy of the Reading fans, and I expect other fans as well have chipped in brilliantly. Um, but for the Reading fans to show their appreciation of what the Port Vale fans did for them, that's something that won't be forgotten. Um, I think it's something that these fans could form a great relationship, and you know, they'll be forever indebted for what they've done for each other.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Andy. Keep up the fantastic work that you are doing, finding your way through what must be one of the most difficult jobs in football at the moment, trying to make head and tail of it all, because there's some strange things as well that are coming out of China. I even read a whole Twitter feed
Hmm.
the other day from a guy called Mike Gow, and I had to read it once and twice. I was like, really don't understand this, and it was only when somebody actually put it into context that I actually got it. So I don't envy your job at the moment. I've got to say that.
Yeah, it's been a real learning curve over the last couple of years, having to familiarize yourself with the finances and the sanctions that come along with that and the punishments that go along with that, the EFL regulations. Yeah, it's something that I'd never really expected to have to cover, but it has been, well, in a perverse kind of way, great experience. It kind of has been really tiring as well to have to keep covering the same things. The
Mhm.
financial issues is not something that you want to cover. But yeah, it has been a real learning curve, and thankfully, there's been some fantastic people out there uncovering these issues, and what is going on in China is really complex. Yeah, thankfully, there are people out there who are experts and know much more about these issues. But yeah, I have to say thank you for everyone for their support and highlighting these issues that are going on at Reading. Not just Reading fans, but people like yourselves, who are taking the time to highlight these issues is so important.
Well, here we're going to continue banging the drum because, like I say, born and bred in the town. Half of me is blue and white, half of me is red and black. You can see that. So I am going to continue, banging the drum and making sure that we'll do that until the day that this man is out of Reading Football Club and Reading Football Club are saved by somebody. Who that guardian angel is, don't know, but I'm sure they're out there, and I'm sure Reading Football Club. Let's be fair, are have got the facilities to be a Premier League club. Somebody will come in, I'm sure.
Yeah, fingers crossed. That is what we need. So
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Well, thank you again, Andy, and no doubt we'll catch up with you very, very soon.
thank you so much. A pleasure.
Cheers, thank you. And thank you everybody for joining us. Remember to hit the like, subscribe, the bell button. We are going to be covering this in a lot more detail over these coming weeks. So make sure that you subscribe so you can get all the lowdown. Do watch my chat with Nick Holton as well, which goes into lots and lots and lots of detail. Do also please check out the fact finding video that I did. So what I did was I collated as much information together as possible about the situation and the amounts of debt and the amounts of money that's going around. So, do please take a watch of that as well. There may be a couple of things which are repeated in all of these videos, but we're not going to stop banging this drum until Dai Yong is out. But until next video, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you soon.